Yes.
Give you a minute to finish writing?
Yes, please, thank you.
And there are snacks over here if anybody gets munchies.
All righty. Okay. Board members, you have a notebook before you, and this notebook has a draft of the strategic plan. Dr. Thomas is here. I actually will walk you through what you have, and then we want to make sure that we update this. As you know, we had a strategic plan that we worked, and that time period ended in 2013. So we're now ready to look at 2014 through 2017. It is a 3-year as opposed to a 5-year strategic plan. If you want it to be a different time period, we certainly can do that. This is just here for a starting point in discussion. We did keep the vision and mission and belief statements where you were when Mr. Mathias, you came on board. We were required by board policy to have a review of that. You did give us some input. We changed some language to the college and or career ready. Since that time and since that meeting, it's on here and or career ready. I believe, Mrs. Fisher, when you were chair, you brought up about really that everyone is going to have a career, whether you're college ready. So you had made the comment about taking out the or, that it just be college and career. So I do recommend that we be consistent. So, but I didn't want to change the document from where you had. So on this first page, my suggestion would be to take out the slash or and just leave it as all students will graduate college and career ready. Everybody agree?
Yes.
With that.
Because quite frankly, it's not either or.
Right.
It's a blend.
Right, it is. So this vision, mission, and belief statement is, with the exception of that correction, as you looked at it a year ago. Unless you'd like to make changes to that, we did not recommend any additional changes. You did very well when you constructed that.
Anyone have a change? No.
Right. Then the next several pages, we kept the same format. And in the format that you have on the left side, you will see the focus area and a descriptor of that. Then you will see the goal, which is as it has been, and then you see objectives. The objectives, what we did here, and board members, you'll know from our strategic plan before, it was pretty global, and then I took it and I took everything that you had in the strategic plan, and then we put even more in-depth objectives, and so we had another goal sheet. It seems a little redundant that we have all these different documents and plans, and it's very confusing for the staff. So what I am submitting to you is that has been combined together, that we put the objectives in one document here. So the objectives you see on the right include what you had in your original strategic plan and some areas that we were working on as well. We tried to include the college and career readiness pieces in it. We tried to make sure that we captured the essence of what we're required to do for the state, as well as the focus that is purely student achievement, that are things that we measure. Then the staff, what goes into the reality of the day-to-day, this now is in one place, one document. The staff then, they have different strategies that they use depending on the departments. They may have some strategies to meet these objectives, but that would be internal for their departments and very specific. But overall, this means all of us in Lake County, we're focused on student achievement, and we know that these are things that we're using to measure student achievement. Any comments, questions? Yes, sir?
Is the level 3 that you have on your student achievement, isn't that the level to move to 3.5?
It varies. The 3.5 is for SCAT right, but each of the other tested areas like math and science and social studies, it isn't 3.5. Okay. That is a cut score. 3.5 is a cut score for SCAT right. In each one of them, I want to make sure looking to my gauge of making sure I'm accurate. So she's my expert.
Actually, writing school.
Writing is now 4.0, it was 3.5.
When I look at the objectives, I know that we have addressed in the past that we have quantifiable goals. When will we start doing that?
Say that again.
Say that again.
Quantifiable goals,
Quantifiable goals.
such as increase the number of schools obtaining increases, percent of the lowest 25. What increase are we expecting?
Well, we can go ahead and set those. That is not a problem to do. We have done that in the past, and we've measured them on another document called scorecard, and we had those metrics in that scorecard.
And I like that because I think that more and more in the future, the accountability is going to be explicit. And I think we should be prepared to share with all of our stakeholders, this is what we're expecting, not only for your child, but everybody.
Right. If I could explain a little bit, I think this will help. Further back in your notebooks, and why I want to quantify this, because I think it answers part of your statement, Mrs. Tricia, but it doesn't completely, so we need to make sure that we use that. Further back in your notebook, with each of the 6 focus areas, each department then has created a scorecard. And what we found is we were doing a lot of redundant paperwork, and we did not need to do that. But each department has their own scorecard, and they have to address different objectives or different ways that they're going to contribute to and impact your areas of focus in your strategic plan, and how they're measured. And we use that same green, yellow, red kind of monitoring, so that the document that you have, the dashboard, is also the reporting mechanism. So we're creating one document. Now, where that answers part of your question, Mrs. Fisher, is because some of these are very much in some of the departments, like in academic services. They're very focused on the academics, and they have metrics in here. But if you go to, I'm picking another area, like transportation, they're not necessarily going to pick those same metrics, because they're looking at on-time arrivals at school, because they want the children in the seats, in the classes, not late. So their metric to increase student achievement is to make sure the students are there on time, so that they're in their seats getting maximum student instruction, because they're not the direct link to it. So their metrics are a little different in student achievement than to say we're going to increase graduation rate by 2%. So where we may want to go back to, and Dr. Thomas, you can add into this, is that if as a district, as a school board, you want to look at these objectives and say, okay, increase participation and performance on SAT, SAT, and PERT, if you want to increase that, say, by 1% each year, then maybe we want to state it that specifically.
That's what I want to see, because quite frankly, I read all those leadership magazines over the weekend that were outside of your office. And they say that to start a culture, everyone has to know what is expected. To maintain a culture, everyone has to have dialogue on achievements. And I think that's very, very important.
I think it going along, if I may, my recommendation is that if this is agreeable, I'll bring this back to you when we put this on for your approval for action. Several school districts, while internally each department will have their metrics, and that's very appropriate, as a district, as a school board, you may want to have, here are 10 key metrics that graduation rate is one. Here's the dozen, or some people will use 7 keys to student achievement, and they'll have the 7 key things. You want, whether it's 7, 8, 10, a dozen. Those common metrics that we're looking at, the percent of schools that are A and B, the percent, that you've increased student attendance, those things I think would be easy. Those are a very communicative point for Chris to get out into the public. I think the public can wrap their arms around it. That would be my recommendation, and let each of the departments have their key metrics that they're measuring and reporting on. Will that answer your question? Or do you want to go down each one of these objectives and have a...
I read all the school improvement plans too, and I saw such a diversity of what each school felt was success. And I think that that is something that we need pages, and some had 24 pages. How can that be?
Can you answer that?
The one that had 87 pages wrote far too much.
I always expect you to be that way.
And I say that because they all used to be that long. And the state did a lot of work this past year to revamp the school improvement template to reduce the number of pages, because quite honestly, if you're given a school improvement plan with 87 pages, it's overwhelming, and people can't pick out what they're really supposed to do. So
It
the
felt
ones
good
that
to
are
me
about
because I could
20,
see it all.
the ones that are about 20 to 25 pages long, those plans are really adhering to the new format that the state established.
Okay. The state, did it establish they can only have 1 or 2 sentences on each page? Because I sure found that too.
Yeah, I'd have to look at this.
And are they proofread before they come in? Because there were tremendous errors.
We go through a pretty extensive process, but we don't catch every error. The schools submit their plans to the district. The district has a very large team of people that review all the plans for their area of expertise. For instance, the program specialists in the curriculum department each read their area of expertise for every plan and make sure that the schools are reporting the performance that the school had and then setting goals that are acceptable for the next year.
Okay. I hear what you're saying and I appreciate it. But if I want an achievement for the county,
Right.
I'd like to see it be more on the same page as you're outlining. These are our 10 key points. Please focus on this. Board members, again, need to be uniquely involved in the school improvement plan so that you see, and it varies from district to district. So.
I do think it's important that as a board, you establish and we answer the question, what are we determining are the measures of success for our district? I think that's the question we up here need to establish and set what those metrics are. Then that, as part of our strategic plan, gets communicated because just like the 87 pages, I think anytime you have something of that volume, you can't wrap your arms around it, and then what happens is it becomes a shelf document, and then it's not of any benefit. I think that being very specific, being very direct and simplistic in the communication, I think we'll get a better job at getting the understanding.
Then the follow-up to that is that everybody should know what's expected. And if you have an overachiever, what a great thing. But what is the expectation? Bill?
I'm a real strong believer in you setting the lead on it. I also agree 1,000% that it needs to be as short as possible, because I'd much rather have someone working on reaching the goal that the superintendent has set for her school than filling out 80 pages or trying to create some document. And so less is more in this case, in my opinion. But each school also is going to have its own individual issues that the superintendent is going to be keenly aware of, or your staff. I again, just glance at this, and I would rather see it much smaller. This is my opinion.
You want to answer that? Well, I just want to make another comment about the superintendent setting the lead for the process. And she did do that for the past 4 or 5 years. Because when the district performance comes back for our previous year's MCAT scores, the superintendent looks at those scores, and then in our district grade and our performance and the difference that we have to improve in order to get an A. So the way that occurred this year is that she set the goal for each content area for the MCAT test to improve by 5 percentage points on the reading, math, science, and then for writing, of course, because it was such a large drop because the proficiency standard increased last year, that's a much larger goal that the schools have to reach. So when the schools developed their school improvement plan, they had the superintendent's goals for the district, and They were asked to use what their past performance was and base the improvement on what the district was seeking to do. So if the school was at, let's say, 45% proficiency for reading, and the district wants to improve by 5%, then they were asked to keep that in mind when they were setting their goals. But keeping in mind, every school has their challenges that they have to deal with, and the schools know what they have to work on in order to get the district where the district needs to be as a whole.
If I may go back to this, your original slogan, get it right the first time. So if we could just take those 10 issues and support the system in its endeavor for achievement, I believe that you will make sure that it gets carried out.
If you remember, board members, it's a chart about this long, and it has those boxes in it, and it's how many points to get to an A. Those are the targets, because, and that's what Dr. Thomas, is explaining to you, because that's how we set it. And then each school takes that chart and they fill in theirs, because they're all at different points, and they're able to wrap their arms around it, because the school improvement plans, what it used to be and what they're required by the state, were these large pages, when in essence they needed to know where they were headed, where they needed to meet the mark, and that's where we designed that chart. So that is the expectation and the chart. This strategic plan, when you look at it, the strategic plan that you have in front of you is 12 pages. This is really it. This is really putting the overall arching specifics to it, because in order to move the district, it isn't just looking at the FCAT. There are all the internal supports and how we do infrastructure and running the operation, how we allocate resources, how we hire staff, how we do certification, how we do professional development, how we do transportation. All those things are the underlying support. So whereas the school improvement plans are looking at the points for the A or so forth in those different areas, those targets, that's looking at student achievement, very detailed and very targeted, but it does not look at all the infrastructure that has to go into our organization to support hitting those targets. That's what this document is to do. And the plans that follow it, and I know it's a lot, the plans that follow it is the department, so that if you look at, I'm just going to pick one, like finance. Finance, they don't directly deal with student achievement, but what they do has severe implications on our ability to meet those metrics in student achievement. So they have to, in this document, they have to go through and say, okay, how am I supporting our schools and our district in student achievement? Well, and they have some things here. They're looking at one of the big ones in Engage LCS, what percentage of our budget goes into direct classrooms. They're going to be monitoring that. That's one of their pieces, or roundabout there. And they have to look at it in all those areas, because they have to streamline efficiency and effectiveness. So while it looks a lot for you here, finance is only dealing with these pages. Purchasing is only dealing with their pages and so forth, but everybody's dealing with these front pages. The top 10 or the 7 keys, however we want to, or seven steps to college and career readiness, however we want to call it, I think as a board we need to collectively set that, and that becomes the overarching there, would be my recommendation.
Ultimately, it's very simple on what we're graded on, is whether it's got an A on the door or not. I mean, that is what the public sees. So that is ultimately where all of the strategic plans take those schools. When we start talking about specific things, I think I would look back to staff as well to say, what are those drivers? We know that chronic absenteeism and those types of things. But to go in here and start picking out FCAT's going to change, and I don't want to go chasing my tail on those things. If you guys are going to pull it off of our benchmarks that are being created during our testing, then that's a different story. But with all the changes and everything else going on, it's one thing that I don't want to do is go put those things out there because nobody understands why we dropped from a B to a C. It's too hard to explain that. And to put that out there, as a document would be, it would take a lot of explanation. But if you guys were able to pick out those key drivers that you believe have significant impacts on student achievement, then it's much more comfortable from a board member standpoint. I mean, I can't pick them out and I can say, well, here's a few I think are probably key, but.
Well, I can use my two high schools. The reason they didn't get A's, they had enough points to be A's. They didn't get them because of the dropout rate. Risk.
Yeah.
So that's an area that I really graduation.
Yes, if I could respond to that. Because Dr. Howard, I do agree with you, there's a lot of conversation about an A on the front door. I have to expand on what you said, because when I got with our visioning session with business and community leaders, there was a lot of concern about the credibility of the state's accountability system. And so they weren't necessarily coming to the table, well, yes, everybody wants to see an A on the front door. They were more focused on how I was making sure our students had the work skills, because they were looking at our employees being ready to go into fill their needs. So they were almost looking at they were asking me about SAT and ACT scores. They were asking me about the workplace readiness skills. Do we measure those? No one asked me about MCAT writing. I mean, they knew that was part of the system, but with all the whole debacle that we had, it had lost credibility and they had no confidence in it anymore. So that almost became irrelevant. And I don't want to speak for them, but I'm just telling you my understanding of the flavor of the group, and I think you were there. And so they almost wanted us to see measuring workplace readiness skills. They were concerned about the work ethic, the attendance, those kinds of skills, and the student achievement on the critical thinking. There were some other things. And none of that factors into the A on the front door. So from an economic development factor, the A on the front door is huge.
Let's remember, those people who sat on that, a lot of them have personal ties into Lake County schools. Their spouse is a teacher. They have a very different view than John Q. Public, who doesn't even know who this board is. I mean, there's a vast majority of people who live in Lake County we have never met. They don't know our names, and that's okay. But we've got to remember that while it's important, the person who's moving here has no clue, unless they're uniquely tied into that and they see it from the teacher or staff perspective. A lot of that they don't understand. And I understand what you're saying, and I agree. But if we're going to put a dashboard together for the schools, I guess my overriding part is, let's not get into the minutia of MCATs and all of those things, because it's changing. And all we're going to do is chase our tail by trying to do that. And that was going back to what Kylie was talking about. Let's get some things that are actually measurable, that are consistent, that we're not going to chase our tail on, at least for the next 3 years.
I think maybe the terminology is, we can take MCAT out, but it is a state standardized test. I think.
I'm good with that.
Yeah.
What Kylie was talking about was specific, she was talking about specific measurements, or we're going to get a 5% increase on this.
Right.
That, I think, is
That's
a different
exactly
case.
Right, I agree with you.
If we want to say that we want our schools to be at 89%, or less for the chronic, or less than 10% for chronic absentee, that is a very easily measure, and it's not going to change. The dropout rate is not going to change. But we need to find those that are key drivers of that education side, not just the numbers that, and I think that ties into what you were saying too about MCAT rights.
Right. We're on the same page.
I don't want to go chase those numbers.
I
We
agree
need to
with
find
you.
out intrinsically what we can use that are our numbers.
I agree.
The basic line is public wants to know an A means an A, and if we need to improve. And I've stated it months ago, that's not clear to everybody because of the grading system. The other piece you brought up, critical thinking. They want to know, how do you implement critical thinking? It's just that simple. Because like road mapping, we are using terminology
year, 2 months, and 8 days ago, I was Joe Public, and we live in sound bites. And whether you're in A district, it matters.
Right.
Now, today, it doesn't matter so much to this board member, because I think the whole system of grading is flawed. And the whole, you can't score more than 1 grade and all that. But the reality is, we have to live with the perception of the public, and that perception is garnered by what your grade is. With that said, if we do, and in my world, if Mount Dora your school?
Yes.
If Mount Dora, there should have been a mechanism where they knew before we got to the end of the year that it was going to cost them points, and what was their corrective action.
Yeah.
So these documents should mean something, and if they're not meeting these expectations to enforce testing or dropout rates higher, in my opinion, that principal ought to be being proactive and asking for help, and they should be coming to the board, so when the scores come out, you're not justifying, you already knew what was going on. You know what I mean? Or you already knew. And more times than not, and we're caught up with running our day-to-day business, and every year I say I'm going to forecast better in my own business.
Right.
And it's difficult, and I totally understand it. And I'm not there, but I think you maybe could be. But if you lose track of that,
Right.
then these don't mean anything to me. At the end of the year, you're surprised when the report comes out.
Right.
You should already know where your school's going to be. My opinion.
I can.
Elaborate on that?
Yes, I can. And Dr. Thomas can as well. When you're talking, and I agree with you about the school grade to the public, I just don't want to see it be the only driver there. And I think when you put it in the context of drivers, that became very clear to me where you were going with that. I think when you look at, because we're very focused on schools' achievement in this conversation right now, the school metrics are in those school improvement plans. Those school improvement plans are not these documents here. So you're not going to see those individual metrics for Mount Dora High School, since that was example to you. Those are in the school improvement plans. I think that, and they do, because we've implemented this year a system called early warning signs for the exact thing that you're talking about, that is actually looking at attendance and some key factors that have been research-based. And all our principals have been trained on those early warning signs, and they're using them, and we're seeing that to be very productive. Dr. Thomas does a lot of data analysis for the high schools with that, with the dropout. It is a very complicated formula, and she has been giving that so that they can be more proactive in that. I think we're getting better at that. So we have put some things in place.
We started all of this with the Learning Zone. We got Katie Pearson in, and we were going to have quarterly reports. And I'm exceedingly grateful that the principals have this mechanism to see where they can improve. I believe that the PTAs, PTOs need to be apprised of this too, so that parents that are concerned can get behind the movement for achievement and work within even their own neighborhood with children that aren't coming to school, and help us find out why they're not. Because we know if a student appears in school, they're going to learn. If they don't, they're not going to learn. And it's an ethical situation. Where a teacher who's always cared for their children goes to a principal who's always cared for the system, and then we go to the PTO, the APT, with that information. We've got skin here, we need to see what we can do. So to me, it's bigger than even what we're talking about. Absolutely.
If you already have those research-based data points, that would probably be a good start for what I was talking about. And if those can already, if you can, it's kind of like the Title I. You know that Title I is not necessarily going to achieve at the level of somebody who has, doesn't have those issues. So if we can have those drivers that are research-based, that are going to work, and have that for each school, at mid-year, like I said, I don't want to overload, but if they're already doing that, I think that would be a good mid-year report to start to put in, and kind of like in the board watch list, instead of just saying, here's our mid-year report on where we're at.
So that you're really talking about the academic mid-year report.
Right.
And the student achievement focus area would be those key drivers.
That's 100%. That's all I do.
And that way we're prepared, and if there's something we need to do in our own community where you look and you say, hey, we're having a serious issue, that board member may be able to get out in front of it and say, hey, I need your help in this, or I need this, I need that, and the other, and they may be able to facilitate some of that wherever we're falling short. But if we wait until FCAT comes out, we're standing there like, oh, well, that wasn't right.
Right.
Madam Superintendent, you and I have discussed in the past, when we've seen trends moving up and trends moving down. That information is so important for everyone, because it's not just one student, it's a collective county assignation of an A, B, or a C.
Okay. Roseanne, do you have to say anything, Debbie?
Well, I've been listening to what everyone's been saying. One, I do this at the college. I understand this. I mean, I'm involved with this. I'm getting ready to do my mid-year of how we've done since our fiscal year began July 1 to now, and then already working on next year's plan. So I like the mid-year reports that if we pull out a couple key areas, it's really going to be critical so that we're not waiting until so late in the year that we're saying, okay, we know, well, we'll do it next year because, it's so late this year. But it goes back to if we can, catch the students early who are having issues, then they're more likely to finish out the school year. With regards to 17 department areas, this is important for every one of their areas. So I don't think we need to get too concerned with what the departments are doing because they have to do this. I think we need to look at our focus areas, and are we going to keep these as our focus areas, or are we going to then say we would like to have these 7 or 10 or 12 items that may now become our goals, goal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then what goes under each one of those. And then, but also having deadlines, for each one to see, are we meeting it? Do we need to extend it further? Can we cross it off the list because it's already been achieved? Because the greatest thing is to be able to have these down and say, I did this, we did this, we did this. We can then move on to the next set of standards for what we want to have in place.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to, I think it's important that we have a comprehensive strategic plan that helps us for a variety of reasons. One, it helps us when we're applying for grants. Because the first thing they look at is your comprehensive strategic plan and the key things. As a board, I think number one, you need to let me know if you want to keep the 6 focus areas that we have, or if you want to change those. If you want those to remain the same, and this format is okay and consistent, then that's fine. I do need to make sure that each department has their plan, that they are being held accountable for the progress that they make from the operations side of the house. Those are in here. If that format works, because the problem is we don't have these out on the web for people to look at what are they working on this year and measure, and I think we need to do that. Because we do that for schools, we need it on the other side of the house. So the first decision point is, what do you want your 6 focus areas, or do you want a completely different ones if they're working and want to stick with them? The second area is that I heard from you is I need to come back with those key drivers. That would be the reporting on the first focus area of student achievement from a district-wide standpoint. That here are 7, 8, 10, whatever it may be, those drivers that you want as a board, you want to have a real monitoring system on those, and from a district perspective. So I would give that to you in that mid-year report. Here's where we are as a district, any areas of the school. The other thing that the chart, I mean, we have one of those for each school, and that's very easy. That has worked well for us. So I think having that with those key data or drivers, I mean, you should word drivers. I think that's the best part.
Good one.
Just
For road mapping.
Yeah, yeah. That we need to bring back to you. I don't know if there's anything specific. So if you could confirm for me, if you like these areas of focus, if you want to change those.
That's what I need to know, yes.
Focus area,
I'm taking advantage of us being, retreat. So I'm just gonna say this. This is my spirit about this, that you know the objective, and I would acquiesce to you to set what they need to be to get to the objective. And that as a board, I'm relying on you, superintendent. So if you want to change things, it's kind of what I'm saying, or if you see something that needs to be changed, because you live it every day. I sell pots and pans. So.
Well, these are my recommendations. I'm bringing forward, this is a draft. These are the areas that I think are the big issues for a district. I think they're the key fundamental pieces to it. So these are my recommendations to answer your question.
Okay, so superintendent's recommended keeping the focus areas that we have.
I'm good with those. On focus area 1, we've already been talking to the Engage LCS about adding ELL. I think that should include those areas that we're focusing on from Engage LCS as well. Because otherwise, we're not doing
Right. We need to make sure they're integrated.
right. Which that wasn't on here. I'm good with all the focus areas. You know, the focus area 1 with the student achievement, there's really not any committees that deal with that, you know, where a board member can come back and give it. But many of these other areas, you know, those are involved with, you know, we have committees and such as that, so we get reports on this stuff anyway. So, I mean, I'm comfortable with where it's at. Changing it, I'm not sure that we're going to find other areas that we're really going to be able to have much impact on. And so I'm comfortable with the areas. I would just say that, you know, we need to make sure that from the board member standpoint that we're getting on those with technology. And I know Carly does a good job of saying those with safety issues and the staff issues that are a little harder as well. You know, community involvement, we all do, you know, our own community. So I'm good with it. You know, we just need to make sure that we're forming each other as a board on where we're at with those as well.
Okay. We tried in the safe learning environment to have, we know we look at the discipline statistics. We also wanted, there was a big discussion about prevention. So we made sure that we put in here a section on prevention as well, and then a section on security, because those are the 3 big areas, and so we wanted to be very intentional about that. So that is a change in what we've done before.
And since you went here, and this is actually on my list of board member items, you know, we start talking about safe learning environment, and many of those things, and Engage LCS will probably do that, but eventually we need to look at those duplication services and kind of trim those down so that we're focused on the ones that we know that we work on. And you know, we've approved a lot of things, and there's a lot of things out there, but do we really know what's working, what's not working, or do we just approve it? And you know, anytime somebody brings up a bullying thing, it's hard for a board member to say, no, I don't want to approve that bullying program, or I don't want to approve that, you know, that program for that special needs student. And you find those, and you know, it's because people are watching us and we say that, and then we look like we look like people are being bullied. So we do need to go back through and make sure that we're giving them the best program that we can, but we don't need to be duplicating it with the rest of the program.
Dr. Mark, you are right on the mark there, and that was the whole emphasis of why we wanted to do that program evaluation and innovation piece of Engage LCS. I think the overwhelming part of it is that we have so many areas we want to go back and evaluate and review, and Dr. Thomas has that in her arena, and to fund that, I mean, it's the capacity of the staff to take on the numbers, because we have a whole lineup of things we want to evaluate, and with one staff person that will be coming on board to do that,
these are our focus areas,
Well,
we need to look at our
these are the
focus.
priorities.
You know, we need to make sure that our strategic plan and our engage LCS and all of those things are tied together, because we, you know, as a board member, we all know that we can't do everything.
Right.
But they all need to align and, you know, sort of sharpen the spear and make sure we're all pushing the same direction.
Totally agree with you. Roseanne, you got any more comments?
No, I have my plan. Thank you.
Bill? Okay. I think what everyone has said is exactly the direction that we need to be going in, and the 6 focus areas that we have are the areas that we are all concerned with. But like you did on number 1, going into detail, and us having this conversation, we picked up on things that we need to get deeper and get into the meat of the thing and work on those and get it corrected so that we have a better understanding of what's happening on the table. All right, Debbie?
We will bring back this document for formal action, and we will bring in key drivers.
Great, great. That'll be terrific.
Okay. Next item is the board priorities and watch list. Did everyone make my list? Dr. Howard didn't.
Oh, what there?
Right?
Actually, I was going, Dr. Hager is going to chart